Welcome to the Hazard Communication Standard Training. This is an important safety training that will help staff better respond in emergency situations involving chemicals in the workplace. Following this training, you will be required to sign and return an acknowledgement form indicating your understanding and completion of course contents. So let's begin. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, revised its hazard communication standards to align with the United Nations global harmonized system of classifying and labeling chemicals. Employers are required to ensure all employees who handle or may be exposed to chemicals in their jobs be trained on the revised standards. The new label elements and safety data sheet requirements is intended to help improve worker understanding of the hazards associated with chemicals in the workplace. Thus, all employees who handle or may come in contact or be exposed to chemicals in their job will need to receive training on the changes to the hazard communication standard. So who must take this required training at the Y? The most common handler of chemicals would be the aquatic staff, maintenance and janitorial employees, child care staff, and possibly others. To help identify who, it helps to identify what is considered a chemical substance in the workplace. The term chemicals include dusts, mixtures, and common materials such as paints, fuels, and solvents. This means that there are many chemical substances out there, and almost all staff at the Y use or come into contact with chemical substances while at work at some point. Thus, we will be working towards ensuring all staff be trained on the revised hazard communication standard. So what do we need to do? Under the new standard, we will still have to do all the things we are currently required to do: obtain and provide information on labeling, ensure that safety data sheets are readily accessible to employees, employee training, eliminate or control risks, emergency plans, and record keeping. So what are the changes? Labeling for incoming containers, once the implementation period is complete, will need to have all global harmonized system elements, including pictograms. The material safety data sheets will be changed to safety data sheets and will be required to be presented in a more consistent and user-friendly 16-section format. Let's first look at the changes to the label elements. The revised standard requires that information about chemical hazards be conveyed on labels using quick visual notations to alert the user and providing immediate recognition of the hazards. Labels must also provide instructions on how to handle the chemical so that chemical users are informed about how to protect themselves. The key elements of the new global harmonized labels are: 1. Product identifier. This can be, but not limited to, the chemical name, code, or batch number. 2. A signal word is used to indicate the relative level of severity of the hazard and alert the reader to a potential hazard on the label. There are only 2 signal words available: danger and warning. 3. Hazard statements describe the nature of the hazard of a chemical, including, where appropriate, the degree of hazard. 4. Precautionary statements describe recommended measures to minimize or prevent effects resulting from exposure to hazardous chemicals or improper storage or handling. This is where PPE, the personal protective equipment, or first aid may be indicated. 5. Supplier identification is the name, address, telephone of the manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party. And 6. Pictograms, which are graphic symbols intended to convey a specific hazard information visually. On hazardous chemicals being shipped or transported from a manufacturer, importer, or distributor consists of a red square frame set at a point with a black hazard symbol on a white background sufficiently wide to be clearly visible. A product may have 1 or more pictograms. Let's take a closer look at each of the pictograms and what they entail. This pictogram, health hazard, indicates the presence of carcinogens, mutagens, reproductive toxins, respiratory sensitizers, target organ toxins, or an aspiration toxin. This pictogram, flame, indicates the presence of a product that is flammable, pyrophoric, which is spontaneously combusting, self-heating, something that emits flammable gas, or self-reactive, or an organic peroxide. The exclamation mark pictogram indicates the presence of a product that may be an irritant to the skin or the eyes, It may be a skin sensitizer causing an allergic reaction, may cause acute toxicity, which is harmful, may cause narcotic effects, may be a respiratory tract irritant, or may harm the ozone layer. This pictogram represents corrosion and indicates the presence of a product that may cause skin corrosions or burns, eye damage, or corrosion to metals. The exploding bomb pictogram indicates the presence of a product that is self-reactive, may be explosive, or is an organic peroxide. Pyrotechnic materials like fireworks materials will fall into this pictogram. The gas cylinder pictogram is gas under pressure, like we would see at one of the pool areas with a bottle of oxygen. The flame over circle is an oxidizer, which can be an extreme fire hazard. The skull and crossbones pictogram represents a product or chemical that may have acute toxicity, which would be fatal or toxic. The environment pictogram of a tree and a fish represents a product that would be hazardous to aquatic life. Employers are responsible for maintaining the labels of the containers they receive. This means that labels must be maintained on chemicals in a manner which continues to be legible and the pertinent information, such as hazards and directions for use, does not get defaced, i.e. faded or washed off, or removed in any way. Employers are not responsible for updating labels on shipped containers. However, the employer must relabel items if the labels are removed or defaced. Also, if the employer is aware of newly identified hazards that are not disclosed on the label, the employer must ensure that the workers are aware of the hazards. How can staff help ensure the Y is in compliance? If you see containers with defaced labels, notify your supervisor right away so we can correct the issue. Like the material safety data sheets, the new safety data sheet provides information on chemical characteristics, safety and health hazards, and precautions. Unlike the MSDS, information is now required to be in a specific order. There are 16 designated sections. Sections 1 through 11 and Section 16 are mandatory. Sections 12 through 15 are optional. Sections 2, 4, and 8 hold the most useful information to an employee who may be exposed to a chemical in the workplace. This will make information much easier to find. These changes should be in place no later than June of 2016. In the new safety data sheet format, there are 16 sections. Number 1 is the identification section, where you'll find product name and any common names and contact information from the manufacturer. Section 2 is the hazard identification section, all hazards regarding the chemical and aligned with required label elements. Section 3 is composition information on ingredients. Section 4 is first aid measures. This is an important section that tells us what the required treatment for an exposure would be. Section 5, firefighting measures, which indicates suitable extinguishers for these types of hazards. 6 is the accidental release measures. 7 is handling and storage. And Section 8 is exposure controls and personal protective equipment. This is important because it tells us what type of personal protective equipment we would need to use for this chemical. Section 9 are physical and chemical properties. Section 10 is stability and reactivity. Section 11 is toxicological information. Section 12 is ecological information. Section 13 is disposal considerations. Section 14 is transport information. Section 15 is regulatory information. Section 16 is other information, where the SDS was prepared or the last revision date. To help companies comply with the revised HAZCOM standards, OSHA is phasing in the specific requirements over several years. The first compliance date of the revised HAZCOM standards is December 1st, 2013. By this time, employers must have trained their workers on the new label elements and SDS format. This training is needed early in the transition process since workers are already beginning to see the new labels and SDSs on the chemicals in their workplace. By June 1st, 2015, chemical manufacturers, importers, distributors, and employers must comply with the new rules except labeling. This is because distributors have till the end of November 2015 to ship containers that may be in inventory previously labeled by manufacturers and importers. By June 1st, 2016, employers must update alternative workplace labeling and hazard communication program as necessary and provide additional employee training for newly identified physical or health hazards. So what is your role in all this? To help ensure that all staff handling chemicals complete their training, to ensure that the OSHA HCS compliance at all facilities is complete, and if you do bring in consumer products such as a Windex or a pesticide or some other item that you would buy over the counter, you need to bring in the SDS from the manufacturer and submit it to your facilities lead for the SDS binder. So, in summary, changes are coming to OSHA's hazard communication standard. Labels for incoming chemicals will be changing over the next several years. Safety data sheets with a consistent format will be replacing older material safety data sheets over the next several years. We all have a role in safety. If you have any questions, contact the Health and Safety Specialist, Jeff Pereira, at Team Headquarters. Don't forget to sign and return the acknowledgement form to your branch Human Resources Administrator.